Thank you. It is good to be back home again. And I still feel a little bit discombobulated because, as you probably realize, what time is it now? We used to have a clock back there, but I'll just preach for the next hour and a half. It's 10:13, which means it's a little bit after midnight where I come from, and it's having a little bit of an impact. As I was telling people at the board, I think I'm running on 50% brain, and the next day I felt like I had about an 80% brain, and as he informed me, you're not there yet. And there's a reason, and it got even murkier and deeper, because last night when I was trying to flesh this out by adding some slides, oh, by the way, a version of this exists from way back when I was doing a YouTube channel in August 20, but it's kind of changed a bit because of trying to make it more personal for here, for now. You've heard the expression, haste makes waste, right? So on the day before we dashed off to Korea and a little bit of time in Japan, I was feeling kind of proud of myself for getting the bulletin information to Linda and everybody else. And then last night, something seemed off. And I realized we're supposed to be in Esther 7, but I gave information for Esther 8. So to honor Azzy and Linda, who already put everything in their communication modes online and in the bulletin, I'm sticking with Esther 8 because, yes, it's a mistake, but there may be one person in this room that's supposed to hear this message instead of the other one. Maybe I'm that guy, I don't know. But often when a really weird mistake happens in my life, there's a reason that I discover later. I'll tell one quick story. Later I want to put some slides up. There's no way to get that stuff ready in 2 days home and trying to catch up with things that accumulated in our absence. But we were sitting around a table, and Iduk Ju, someone we knew 37 years ago, actually I knew him about 40 years ago, and he met with us around the table and he said, I used to think that God answered prayer intermittently. I'll answer this one, the other one not so. I've come to believe that God answers every prayer. It isn't the time or the way I expected many times, but he answers every prayer. I'm going to move that a little bit. Sitting beside him, Pastor Kang Ye said, I found that out too. He said, I had one prayer I prayed that came true 50 years later. I had my little baby, Kang Johan, John Kang, in my arms, crying. Back in the day in Korea, they didn't have enough doctors, and so you could go to the drugstore, and the pharmacist would look at your whatever malady you had, prescribe the medicine for you, and sell it to you. You didn't even see the doctor. Pharmacist looked at Pastor Kang Yeshik and said, your boy needs a pediatrician. So he went to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician had an injection he prescribed, and as the nurse was trying to get the vein and dug, and the poor little baby was crying, and he said, as a father, you feel the pain worse than your baby. The baby won't believe that, but the dad knows that. And the nurse is digging and digging, and the dad prayed, Lord, help this nurse find the vein without causing so much pain. 50 years later, that baby's wife is a specialist in giving injections with less pain than most nurses know how to do. God answered that prayer in a very different way. Today is a couple of stories that are kind of like that. Providence on Parade. I'm sorry, the climax is last week that never happened, but we'll do it later. I know, it's out of order. We'll go from 8 to 7. Isn't that the way you count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 7, 9, 10, 11. Jeremy's not the only dyslexic person here today. But when you celebrate, what does celebration bring to mind? Maybe fireworks and the boom of the... Some people get PTSD from that stuff and they hide on July 4 or the night before. Maybe instead of that, it's some kind of cake, like a birthday cake, anniversary, wedding, whatever cake to celebrate. Or maybe it's some kind of other treat like this banana split. I remember a birthday I had when we could request something different than cake in my family. What would you like for your birthday? Oh, how about a banana split? So they gave me a banana split, and Dad took the picture, and he did his own developing in a dark room back in those days, and It didn't turn out. He had a new flash, so he had a banana split the next day. And it didn't turn out. And then in my little diary, after the third day, there's a little, this time the flash worked. However you celebrate, let's take a look at this celebration. It has something really different in it, unique. So pretend that Haman's already dead. Actually, he is. But you can pretend that you got the story already, even though we never got there in the story. Chapter 8, verse 1, if you have your Bible. It's also on the screens. On that day, King Ahasuerus, or Ahasuerus, they called him, gave Queen Esther the house of Haman. Whoa. He gave her the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. That was a secret. And now everybody would know this is how they are related. So the house of Haman's now into Mordecai's hand. In this Mahula, how he's related, it's sort of like Jesus used to ask people, what is that to you? It's that kind of language. Who is he to you? By the way, who is he to you? Not Mordecai, but Jesus. So the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed Mordecai. Whoa. We see in this book many times the women have some influence, and here she's starting to give some more commands. Esther appointed Mordecai, right there while the king's watching, over the house of Haman. She's got influence. She has growing power. There was the proud man, Haman, who used to be on the scene and who now had come to his end along with his 10 sons. But that's another, that comes a little later. Mordecai, the mild-mannered man who wouldn't bow, now is being elevated. He's going to be elevated even more as the story continues. Spoke again to the king, fell down at his feet and implored him with tears. Notice, she's going through some pretty strong measures. She had just quietly walked down the aisle in the palace that first day, hoping he would raise the scepter for her to touch. But this time she's falling down, she's crying. She's really upset. And what is she asking for? La'avir, in their language, it comes from avar, which is to go over, to go from this thing to that thing. Let me just take another look at this. That one caught my attention so much when I first read this in Hebrew. I once was this, but now I'm that. We saw that in John. Remember, what is it, John 9, the blind man? I don't know about where he's from, and I just know this. I once was blind, and now I see. Where have you been from? What is this mess that you've been in? What are you coming from? What is he taking you to? You might not even know what he's taking you to yet, but that's a term that as you read this in Hebrew in Esther 8, there's a direction somewhere. Behind you may be ugliness. Before you is what he really intends for you. This happens to be a picture in Switzerland, but think of it even better than that. Heaven on the other side. But not only heaven, even in this life, there are things that may hurt while they happen, but they're bringing us what he actually wanted us to gain through the strengthening. Verse 4, the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. Now Esther arose and stood before the king. And she said, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, and I am pleasing. She's being really careful to lift him up in her speech, even though he's being very supportive and very proactive on her side. He's still King Ahasuerus. He's a man that's moody, and he can suddenly command someone to die, or suddenly make a command that's healing. So she said, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that will come to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen? What's the secondary problem? The first problem is there's a command to kill all her people. What's the second problem? What kind of laws do they have in Persia at that time? You can't change. Even the king cannot change what he has sealed with his signet. Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, "Indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hand on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you please in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring, a signet ring." That's just like we saw before. He's giving the authority to Haman. Write it the way you want it. Sign it. Seal it. It will go out. Well, the sealing is the signing. Will be sealed at some point. Whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke. Now, that's a human law. The real deal with heavenly law is even stronger. When God seals it with his signet, it's happening. Nobody can change it. Anyway, they tried to make it that way with Persian law. You can't change it. Even if you wish you can change it. You could supersede it with another law. So the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, the princes of the provinces, from India to Ethiopia. All the way from the east over to the west, and Persia's in between. We hear a lot about Persia, Iran, right now in the news. But back then it was a center of power. In the 3rd month, Sivan, on the 23rd day. Remember back in chapter 3? I'll chase that rabbit just for a moment. Mordecai's command was exactly 70 days after Haman's command. For a Jewish reader reading through the book of Esther, he would think, that's sort of, as we chase this rabbit a little bit, that's sort of like the command that was from Haman on the 13th day of the 1st month. 70 years, or 70 days in this case, would line up with the 70 years captivity that Jeremiah had predicted, as we see here, the 3rd month, Sivan, 23rd day. So as they thought about the 70 years of captivity predicted in Jeremiah 25, they see, we had captivity, and now God is undoing all that. He is promising us, I will take your captivity and remove it. I will give you hope. I will take your horror and turn it into joy. And so it was now written as Mordecai commanded. The worst thing that they were going to face was now being reversed by another law. But it's complicated, as we'll see in a later time we together. It's complicated because the people who hate them do not just magically disappear. There were 127 provinces in all. That's a lot of administrative districts. To every province in his own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. We read that rather lightly, but Debbie and I experienced some of this personally in the last few days, as each time we get on a plane, they're speaking a different language. And when we go to Korea, it's kind of okay because I still know some Korean and we could get around, though I had forgotten so much. But in Japan, I know like 5 sentences of Japanese, and some of them didn't exactly pertain. Samui desu ka? Are you cold? No, it's hot outside. Anyway, and so some of the stuff you memorize is meaningless in other contexts. But in each of these places, they had it in their language so they would understand. He wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on royal horses bred from swift steeds. These were not the ones for ceremonial parading around like we read about a couple chapters ago. These were the news there quickly. These letters, by these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate. Wait. They protect their lives. I can't change the law to say it's not allowed for you to attack the Jews, because Haman's law says you all go out and you attack them and you get to keep the booty. No, but I write another law. You may protect yourselves legally. This actually is in Jerusalem when I went there with my dad, and no, those were slides. This is when I was there in 2019. And they're protecting themselves. Sometimes we see them going a bit too far, but this particular time. The legal language, destroy, kill, and annihilate. Is that familiar? Of course it's familiar. That's Haman's language. They took his language and said, you said that's to happen to us? Nope. You come to do it, and legally we have the authority to do it to you. And the king let his signet ring press that clay. All the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women, to plunder their possessions, and so these people that were going to destroy, kill, and annihilate. What am I doing? Going up? Oh, I see. I'm just showing back in chapter 3. It's Haman's language. And it comes again as Mordecai's language. You can do as it was said could be done unto you. On one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. It's coming. It's not here yet. You notice where they stand. They're standing in between the decree for their death and the decree for their life. You're going to see yourself there before too long. There's going to be the death decree for those who are God's people. We read about that in Revelation 13, those who stand true to him. But at the same time you see that decree, there's also God's decree. And you stand in the time between the decree and its execution, and as you stand in that time, what do? I like what people did before this came true. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province and published for all the people, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. You notice that changes as God talks about you don't avenge yourself. As we get into the New Testament, he says, actually in Deuteronomy, same thing, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay. We sit back and God takes care of the messy work. But back then, he didn't let them sit back. The couriers who rode on the royal horses went out, hastened and pressed on by the king's command. The decree was issued in Shushan, the citadel. When we read that about the decree was issued in Shushan, well, I'll come to that. Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. Incidentally, Shushan, if you twist it up a little bit from Shushan to, Shashon, that's the word to rejoice. So that's kind of a little play on words in their language. And the Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor. And in my Hebrew Bible, I've circled this joy and the Shushan and connected them because they're almost the same word. But as Paul Volk once said back in 1987, God wants you to be happy, healthy, and holy, not sad, sick, and sinful. That's actually scriptural. We don't have it in one verse like this in the Bible, but you have all the principles there about how he wants to take your sadness and turn it into joy. He wants to take your sickness and to bring you health, and to take your sin away and make you holy. In every province and city, wherever the king's command and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a holiday, Yom Tov in their language. Then many of the people of the land became Jews because fear of the Jews fell upon them. Does that ring a bell? Fear of the Jews. Reminds me of the statement way back in Genesis. But before I get to that, you can just imagine them celebrating. These are 2019 pictures in front of the Western Wall as a little group of Jewish people were dancing around in a circle, just dancing and wearing their little the tassels that show their loyalty to the Lord. For the fear of the Jews fell upon them. That takes me back to Genesis 31, where Jacob is telling Laban, unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely you would have sent me away empty-handed. There is a time and a place where the fear of God comes into people who would otherwise refuse to do his will. He gives us a choice, but there are times he steps in because someone is taking away the choice he wants us to have. And he puts his fear, the fear of Isaac, would cause Laban to let Jacob go back home. So the Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor. And I pause for a moment and I say, when did the celebration happen? Before the death decree was to be executed. They didn't wait to see the deliverance. They accepted the deliverance as a reality before it was a reality. Some of you, maybe all of you, you see this magazine come around, Adventist Journey? I don't know when this came. We were gone. But Debbie had it sitting on the table last night, and I picked it up. And there's a story about Esther chapter 8 by Dick Dirksen. I was so impressed. It's actually a story about Jenny in Port Angeles, Washington. but Jenny knows what this means. Jenny, back there, she was screaming and running for all her, all she was worth, a homeless gal she was. And as she was running after her car with all her possessions in it, screaming, this guy was stealing it from her, and there was nothing she could do about it. All her possessions were in that car. And now she was not only homeless, she was homeless without a car to sleep in, which is a deeper kind of homeless need. She was in the parking lot of the Salvation Army building in the town, and Connie came over and said, wait, you can't do anything now. It's dangerous to chase that guy. She got Jenny to stop. And she talked with her and tried to bring her hope, but Jenny was deeply involved in lifestyle choices that harmed her. Among those were drugs she was taking. She ended up sleeping in a tent. This is a picture, I think, from Washington, D.C. We saw this in places Debbie and I used to like to go and walk in Chicago when we were visiting a few years ago. And we drove there and walked to the beach just to take a walk along the shore, and we thought, ooh, it feels uncomfortable. It's like this, in between where you park, where you walk. And you wonder if these people are going to approach you and what restraints there are on how they might ask for fiscal support, panhandle or something. Anyway, Jenny now was left in a tent, and it would get, over time, less and less impervious to the elements, and the cold would force the wetness of the snow into her tent. And she was miserable, and once, winter of 2017, she was so miserable. She jumped up out of that tent. She ran outside and she was screaming, why is this? Well, here are her words. God, please, all I want is to be warm, to be clean. I just want my family back. And then she took off. She got on her bicycle. It was so hard. Even when she'd go to sleep after the car was stolen, she'd tie the bicycle to her body, her wrist or her foot, and she would tie her backpack to her body so she'd feel if somebody tried to take it away. But she got on that bike and she was riding out in the middle of the night, and then she stopped because the chain fell off her bike. You know how it disconnects and you have to fiddle with it, but it was 3 a.m. and the police stopped like, what are you out here? I'm trying to take myself to rehab. Yep. If I believe that, you probably have some oceanfront property to sell me in Arizona. But she said, no, really, I'm going to get some rehab. And this policewoman, this police officer, is the one that had arrested her when she was in a park on a bench, sleeping on a bench where it was not permitted, and she had never shown up in court and never paid her fine. So she knew she'd be hauled off to jail. She told the police officer, really, this time I am going in for rehab. And then the officer softened and got a flashlight and fiddled around, helped get the chain back on the bike. But she said, you know what? If I arrest you, you could get a few nights in the jail with a shower, warm bed, you're out of the cold. And Jenny said, yeah, I'd like that. So she said, I'd never had handcuffs put on me so loosely. They barely held on. And the officer took her from the bicycle, well, I don't know, maybe had the trunk off to jail. Not this one. This is a picture from South Africa from the internet. But took her to jail. And she ended up 21 days in that jail before she was released. But while she was in that jail, somebody stopped by with a little handheld Bible. He called it his little emergency pocket Bible. And he said, your story's in the Bible. Yeah, right. My story? In your book? Yes, your story's in the Bible. And he took her to Psalm 69. Great dyslexic psalm, right? 96 and 69. But it's 69. And she chose to memorize the 36 verses of this psalm. I'm just going to put about 8 of them, or 7.5 on the screen. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck, David writes. I sink in deep mire where there's no standing. I've come into deep water where the floods overflow me. I am weary with my crying. My throat is dry. My eyes fail while I wait for God. Those who hate me without cause are more than the hairs of my head. They are mighty who would destroy me. Jump ahead to verse 6. Let not those who wait for you, O Lord God of hosts, be ashamed because of me. Let not you be confounded because of me, O God of Israel. But as for me, my prayer is to you, O Lord. In the acceptable time, O God, in the multitude of your mercy, hear me in the truth of your salvation. Deliver me out of the mire, and let me not sink. Let me be delivered from those who hate me, and out of the deep waters. Hear me, O Lord, for your loving kindness is good. Turn to me according to the multitude of tender mercies. You may be noticed, as we once before went to Psalm 13, and we noticed there it was cleanly divided into 6 verses, 2 and 2 and 2. 2 verses of complaining about what's wrong, 2 verses of asking God to do something about it, and 2 verses of, I praise you anyway. Here it is not cleanly laid out. It's all mixed up in a jumble. But 3 things are still there. Pouring out on God all the problems that are in the heart. At the same time asking him, do something about it. At the same time, I praise you. I don't know what you're going to do, but I praise you. And those 3 mixed together bring healing to our emotions. That night, it was the 28th day that she had been clean. She was out of the jail. That was 21 days in jail, but she had been clean. No more drugs. And her friends are gathering around trying to get her into drugs. She's back out on the street, living in a tent. And as she was lying there in her tent, not in a cushy bed like this, she had this weird dream that she was out there telling people about how long she'd been clean. And she woke up and thought, why not? So, a couple days later, she didn't do it immediately. When she'd been clean for 30 days, she took the cardboard from under her sleeping bag, and she wrote, I have 30 days clean, or I think it's I have been 30 days clean. And while she was holding that sign, another police officer pulled by, a guy this time, and he said, wow, that's something. 30 days clean. And he pulled a Sharpie out of the car and he said, here, let's make those letters bigger, bolder, so everybody can read when they're driving by. I've been clean. I've had 30 days clean, or something like that. 30 days. She was celebrating. She was not 100% free from what had held her down, but she was claiming the victory as she was still in the journey. I've been clean 30 days. Jenny updated her son day through 77, 31, 32, 33, right up to day 77. And people would wave when they drove by, and some would honk their horns, and they were so happy to see the victory continuing for this person living in desperate circumstances. Eventually, after the 77 days, 78, 79, she stopped holding the sign out, and eventually she was baptized on the 7th of June, 2025, last year. And she is a Seventh-day Adventist now. Application. We've got to tie this together. Celebrate in advance. You may be experiencing something that you're not seeing the results you want, but you can still celebrate that God is acting in your life. And what are some of those ways that you might celebrate? Think about it. It might not be dancing in the streets of Jerusalem. It might be something really different. It might look more like holding the sign, I've been 30 days clean. Or maybe not a sign. Maybe it's a quiet, introvert type of celebration. That's fine. Maybe it's more extrovert in front of other people. But whatever it is, even though the journey is not complete, we can celebrate in advance. That's one of the reasons we celebrate Sabbath. We celebrate God is working in our lives, even though we don't see the destination yet. We see it by the eyes of faith. So the next steps, I challenge you, think of one specific way to celebrate something God is doing for you. You might not be there yet, but you can start celebrating before you get there. There will be celebrating when we actually get there. And Esther takes us as well. But what is one specific thing God is doing? It's not done yet, but He's doing for you. How can you celebrate it before you get there? I'm excited that Emma's come forward a couple of times for these calls for baptism. There may be someone here in this room who says, I'd like to be baptized. If you would also like to do that kind of thing, just come to the front while we sing our closing song. But Providence on Parade, let people know God is in your life. He's changing you. He's giving you hope. He's giving you a future. We're singing song 213, Jesus is Coming Again.
Let's all stand. Lift up the trumpet and loud let it ring. Jesus is coming again. Cheer up, ye pilgrims, be joyful and sing. Jesus is coming again. Coming again, coming again. Jesus is coming again. Echo in hilltops, proclaim it, ye plains. Jesus is coming again. Coming in glory, the Lamb that was slain. Jesus is coming again. Coming again, coming again. Jesus is coming again. Evenings and earth down a vast wandering throng. Jesus is coming again. Tempest and whirlwinds, the anthem prolong. Jesus is coming again. Coming again, coming again. Jesus is coming again. Nations are angry by this sweet to know. Jesus is coming again. Knowledge increases, men run to and fro. Jesus is coming again. Coming again, coming again. Jesus is coming again.
Lord God, we are so thrilled that you're coming again, that Jesus is breaking through the clouds and ending the nonsense and starting a permanent presence with you where everything is wonderful. But we know there's a time of healing that has to come in between now and then. We have some goodbyes to say, some hellos, and we're so eager for the stuff that we let go and the stuff that we receive. But we don't want to show up in heaven alone. Please work through us to touch other lives, that through us you'll bring others to be ready for your kingdom too. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.